Hey, what's up everyone? Mekkah here. A while ago I finished playing Fire Emblem Fates Conquest on my channel, and a lot of people wanted to know my overall thoughts on the game before the fuckery that is Revelations washed them all away, so here they are. In a nutshell, gameplay good, story bad. I don't think anyone will be surprised by this opinion. It's just about the coldest take there is in the fandom, right besides, you know, maybe Edelgard isn't 100% evil, or Shadows of Valencia had great presentation, and this game really makes you feel like you're a Fire Emblem, so that's it for this video. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, peace, bye. Okay, maybe not. Here's the longer version. So, it all started about a year ago when a subscriber of mine, I think I should supposed to pronounce it Hayaya, offered to send me a Conquest cartridge so that I could play the game. Not even like, let's play it, just play it. And if I recall correctly, they were pretty insistent on wanting to send it to me. And I really cannot thank them enough for being that, because I was a little hesitant on accepting gifts, but I'm very grateful for them for offering still. So I didn't have a capture card at the time, and I decided, you know what, I don't really want to show my face, but I can just use my phone to film my hands while I unpack the cart and then play the game on my 3DS. And I knew it would make the quality shitty, but the novelty of me playing a Fates game would probably be worth it to a lot of people. And indeed it was, because to this day the video is watched by over 40,000 people despite the horrendous quality. Cool. And then Mangs offered to let me borrow his 3DS with capture card as well as a Fates copy that would work with it, which was another great act of generosity. The reason I needed his Fates copy was because of the region lock on our 3DSs. So I had to wait a little bit for it to arrive, and I had to put the Let's Play on break for a little bit, but when it came back it would be easier to watch. My playthrough was sort of blind. I'd never played it before, but I watched like a whole playthrough of every Fates game so I would know the story. And I didn't really watch much of the gameplay. I mean, I've seen a couple of Conquest streams and like a random video here and there, but generally I knew jack squat about the gameplay and how it kind of feels. I started out the playthrough on hard mode, and I was honestly, I was really happy with the difficulty for playing. However, once I got to like the stairway map, not the giant stairway or like the whatever it's called, but the one where you just teleport around on the stairs, that one was when I found it getting pretty annoying to commentate, since I spent so much time just checking out stuff, you know, who is this character, what are these skills, what do they do, what is this weapon, what does it do to my stats, what are these enemy ranges, and I found it kind of grating to look at when editing, but I also didn't want to leave it out because it would make the whole thing very choppy, it would mess with the flow a lot, and I also really wanted to give my initial reactions and thoughts on the game. And in the end I decided I would just turn down the game difficulty from hard to normal mode after an attempt at like that chapter, I believe. Actually, it was the chapter with all the pots and where you fight Ryoma, I think, that made me kind of do that. I played that one on both difficulties, I remember pretty clearly. Like, I talked it over with Mangs and he said, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Now, I knew a lot of people were looking forward to seeing me tackle the harder difficulty, but I really found it wearing on me, and I knew even longer chapters were ahead. And I have no qualms about admitting that a lack of divine pulses or save states played a part in this decision. I mean, to be fair, Three Houses came out like after, or like it came out somewhere during the Let's Play. But the point is, if I'm playing a Let's Play of GBA Fire Emblems, like say FE7 Negative Growth or FE6 Reverse Recruitment, I would occasionally use save states to save myself and Mangs some time. I wouldn't like save scum difficult parts, but just do it so that I wouldn't have to like make the exact same 5 turns of movement over and over again just to get to the harder parts. Because no one has anything to gain by me wasting my time like that. Most people, I feel like, watch to see newer parts. So, to keep my enjoyment up for both playing and commentating, I switched to normal mode, which was a huge relief. The biggest difference was that I no longer had to deal with the load of enemy skills. And I'm gonna take some time to talk about skills for a moment, and it might not be a common opinion for Conquest, but I firmly believe that the reliance of skills in later Fire Emblem entries is a mistake. Skills overall make Fire Emblem harder to play, but for all the wrong reasons. There are positive aspects to them, don't get me wrong. Skills can, if well executed, add like a layer of depth to the game that wouldn't otherwise be there, and especially personal skills, they really help flesh out and reinforce a character. I love how the personal skills in Fates and Three Houses make sense for characters to have, but a lot of the time I hate the impact of skills in gameplay because it's extra things to remember and take into account that aren't always easily visible to the player. So when you're trying to strategize in Fire Emblem, or at least when I'm trying to strategize in Fire Emblem, you have to process a lot of information at once. Even in the older entries where there's a lot less going on, it can get overwhelming at times. Unless you're playing like a very easy game where one character can just pick up a javelin and fight an entire batch of enemies without breaking a sweat. You often have to do a lot of math and range checking to make sure that your moves are safe. Generally the way I do it is like, say my character has 24 HP, I have 10 defense, The enemy has 15 attack, this one is 18, this one is 17, so that means I take like 5, 8, and 7 damage. That's a total of 20, so I survive, but I pretty much cannot take another hit from there. That's a fairly simple situation, but you don't want to have to do too much of this at once, and skills, they really turn it into a mess, because suddenly you're taking damage from like Poison Strike, for example, that messes it all up. The biggest offender that got me is Darting Blow, because often the way I check how much damage an enemy does is not by like just calculating, because calculating gets like really tiring after a while. But when an enemy is Darting Blow, I would like check the forecasts of how I do in battle. But obviously when the enemy is Darting Blow, they will have more speed when they initiate, but it doesn't show that when I'm trying to initiate in the combat forecast, so that throws me off, and I just get doubled on enemy phase and be like, oh shit, right. And the same happens in reverse. If one of my characters has Darting Blow, then the same happens in reverse. I suddenly get doubled when I don't expect to. Another thing that makes calculations a lot more tedious to do is debuffing. I'm very torn on the high amount of ninjas in Conquest and the whole concept in general, because I actually do like parts of it. On one hand, it is really great that the game can give you an absolute juggernaut like Camilla and Xander, but it can still be difficult, because if a ninja debuffs them, then they can still die, which is insane considering how tanky these characters can be. And Fates in general seems okay with giving you strong and even bulky units, but their HP is pretty low, so if they take even somewhat significant damage, they can still die very quickly. But it's good design for like difficulty, but it makes a calculated enemy phase a nightmare, because first of all you need to factor in exactly how much you're getting debuffed by, and then you also need to know which enemies attack before and after debuffing, and that's before abilities like Poison Strike take effect too. So I feel like in Skill Emblem, if you really want to take into account all the possible things that can go wrong, it takes forever to find and process all the information. It makes gameplay very slow and tedious to watch. Now if you're used to it, if you've played like a lot of Fates games, I know it's not as bad in Birthright, and as far as I can tell, not as bad in Revelation either. And like if you've played Conquest a lot, then you kind of, develop something. But for a new player, I found this very, very tiresome to work with. I could do it, but it would mostly be about me doing math and not really me about playing the game. I would make very few moves in the amount of time it would take me to figure out my way through. And honestly, I think a lot of people play Fire Emblem and like maybe Fire Emblem Heroes too, by just kind of trial and erroring their way through and just putting them in range and see what happens. Three Houses kind of encourages this with Divine Pulse. You just kind of try it out and see what you missed on your initial, tryout. But Fates is very punishing for that because the maps are very long. And the same thing kind of happens with like the pair-up system with the defensive pair-up. That also makes figuring out exactly how your enemy phase goes is a bitch, because how many of you actually bother figuring out when exactly your shield gauge is going to be used, on which enemy it's going to trigger? So yeah, I'm not a big fan of the impact of skills having on gameplay. It's probably fine if you're playing like a lower difficulty and not a whole lot is happening in that regard, but if you're like me and you actually want to figure out what's going to happen on enemy phase before it actually happens, you're trying to strategize a lot, then I don't really like it, and I would like to move away from it in future games. They don't have to be gone entirely, but I'm a bigger fan of, for example, the Three Houses skill system, because it feels a bit more straightforward. It might be just because I've played Three Houses more often. But ideally, I think in an ideal world, we just have personal skills and maybe like one class skill, and that's about it. It doesn't have to be toned down to the level of FE8, where it's like only 3 class skills in the whole game across like all the classes. But I would like it if it was like less reliant on skills in the future. And also because I'm not really a big fan of like Fire Emblem as a game where you grind characters up and turn them into like machines with like different skill sets and stuff. I like it when Fire Emblem is more straightforward, because I think the game has plenty of depth without the skills. But I know like a lot of people like the skills a lot, and they've been in since, well, they've been reintroduced a lot of times, but Awakening especially I think went overboard on it. Now that was a long rant on skills, and I know you're here for the rest too, but it really dictates so much of Conquest and indeed Fate's gameplay that I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say about it, like about gameplay in general. I do love that the game managed to walk a balance between the unfair ambush spawns from like FE6 and the joke that are reinforcements from, for example, FE7, because even though in Conquest the reinforcements don't move when they appear, they do pose a threat just through positioning alone, and they mostly seem to come out based on zones rather than turns, so regardless of player phase, they accomplish about the same thing, which I think is good. If a game accomplishes the same thing against different players, like the same kind of feeling of dread, or being bamboozled, as Max put it in his Fire Emblem ranking thing, that's a very good way to put it. That's what the game does really, really well. If you like Conquest for this reason and you haven't gone back to older games much, you should try out FE12 New Mystery, because it incorporates similar reinforcements and it works so well to make maps more engaging. New Mystery does have ambush spawns though, so I recommend you look them up in advance and then try to find a way around them, or use the save points to your advantage. That's something that I can't really do in my playthrough right now, because I have to like spin the wheel every time I do that. But yeah, that game does it as well as Conquest does, I think. Maybe Conquest does it even better, considering they're not ambush spawns. Also, they're much better than those bullshit zone-based same-turn reinforcements that Three Houses Maddening does, where certain enemies will only spawn within an area if you go into that area. So basically, no matter what the enemy gets, no matter what, the enemy gets the first hit in. I'm reading from a script. I hope you can't tell. So yeah, that is fucking bullshit. Especially that one bit in Chapter 5. It's the worst. Now, when it comes to map objectives, Fates has that weird seize objective where you can seize with people that aren't Khorne, and I think that barely adds anything to gameplay beyond like killing the boss. But I guess it's okay that you still have to get 2 people to the end point instead of 1. Still not much more interesting than a route. I will say the defend map, the famous Chapter 10, that was a lot of fun. That was really well executed. That is the pinnacle of Conquest gameplay, I think. I don't think any map will ever beat that in like the whole Fate series for me, even though I've only played 1/3 of it. Story-wise, Fate's story. That horse has been long dead and sent to the glue factory, so I won't spend too much time bashing it. I will say that lately there have been some people in the subreddit and like other places that seem to have the mentality that just because it's been said a lot doesn't mean it shouldn't, like, they believe that just because it's been said a lot means it shouldn't be said anymore, and anyone who likes the story should keep singing their praises. Kind of a double standard there. I've even seen people claim that Fate is underrated now because of its good music and Conquest's good gameplay. I think the proper term for Fate is still that it's a very divisive game. Very big ups, very big downs. People looking for a deeper, more intricate story are in the wrong place. The story, in my opinion, is bad. The characters are one note. And just because it's been a long time since the game was released, and just because it's been said a lot, doesn't make it any less true. Of course, to an extent, this is all subjective. And yes, of course, there are more Fire Emblems that have bad writing, but damn. Now, a lot of people went into Fate with all the hype of a new release behind it. I personally passed up on playing Fate as it was first released. I don't remember why exactly, but this meant I got to experience Conquest almost completely fresh with lower expectations. I knew that the story would be just something to laugh at a bit and mostly ignore, and I'm glad I did. I actually saw the story before. As I said, I watched a no commentary playthrough of all Fate's routes on Omega Evolution's channel, just so I wouldn't be spoiled in it anymore. But it had been a while when I played it, so it was still like a relatively fresh experience. But it still doesn't hold up, and almost every exchange just makes me cringe. I see some people defend it with like Fire Emblem has always been anime, but for me, there is no way around that there's a big gap between the older and the newer Fire Emblems in this regard. Three Houses, it took a big step back in what in my opinion was a better direction, but it still bears some symptoms of what I would call, for lack of a better word, awake fate-sitis, and I think that will remain in the series. I'd explain myself in depth here, but I think if you've been watching me for a while, you know what they are. If you want any examples, I'd like to refer you to my Bullet video. I'm not a big fan of this whole thing, but it is what it is, and I'm still gonna love the series despite of it. Fate's story is actually pretty good if you do this one simple trick. I haven't really discussed Fate's characters at all. I just kind of refer to the story in general sense, but that's probably for the best since I skipped reading supports during the playthrough. And honestly speaking, the way characters act in the story and in talk scenes doesn't really make me eager to find out more about them. I've seen people say that there are some real hidden gems in the Fate supports, but I've decided for now it's really not worth digging for them, not worth my time basically. Of course, I can't go this whole thoughts video without praising Fate's music. Even among Fire Emblem games, this is one of the better soundtracks that I've heard. It does rely on having the same motive throughout it a lot, and I've seen a post point out somewhere just how repetitive it actually is, but I really love Fate's music. It's great. There's some games that have, like, all Fire Emblem games have pretty good music, but there's some that definitely have less, but Fate is one that has some pretty damn good music. So, yeah, in a nutshell, gameplay good, story bad. I'm sure you needed this video to tell you that. But those are my thoughts on Conquest. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you enjoyed the playthrough of Conquest. I know it's been a while since I finished it. I love doing it solo. I love doing it with Rin as well. I'm glad to have another Fire Emblem game under my belt. It's nice to like play a game that was outside of my personal bubble in a way, because I was always just kind of stuck playing the older games, and it's nice to experience something new. As you know, I'm torturing myself with Revelations right now, so If you're curious about that, go check it out. It's more heavily edited. I just kind of go through it really quickly, just to get rid of it, basically. But it's ironically fun. It's ironically fun. But please help. Bye.